What's going on, everyone? Welcome back. Today we have got our Week 8 fantasy football wide receiver starts and sits for every single matchup. So make sure to tune in. If you enjoy, hit that like button, subscribe, give us a follow on Twitter at AllDayPigskin to continue interacting with us there. And let us hear it in the comment section. Do you agree, disagree, along with any other questions you guys might have? We will do our best to answer them all. But with that being said, let's get right into it. Real quick, before getting into our breakdown, a quick word from our partners at PrizePicks, which is our favorite DFS site of choice this NFL and fantasy football season. If you guys aren't familiar with them, do yourself a favor and check them out. In fact, when you sign up right now and use code ADP, you get a 100% deposit match up to $100. And look, we're already doing all this research for fantasy football matchups. So why not take advantage of it and get some profits as well? PrizePicks, well, they allow you to basically do exactly that. They have so many different player prop bets, not only in terms of single stat DFS, but also in terms of fantasy score. And you can combine them any which way you want. Super simple, super easy to use. All you have to do, choose two more players from the board, and then just pick the over-under on their projected fantasy score or on their single stat. Again, pretty much for every single matchup as the week progresses, those options will be updated even more so. And then the great thing is you've got two different options in terms of how you want to bet it, whether it's a flex play, so that way you can miss one of your selections but still win. Obviously, that's the safer choice. Or if you want more bang for your buck, check out the power play, where if you get all your picks correct, well, you win even bigger. So again, check all of that out. Details in the description. And we kick off Week 8 on Thursday night with the Green Bay Packers at the Arizona Cardinals. And immediately you're going to see a big-time name missing here. That is, of course, Davante Adams for the Green Bay Packers. Not only Adams, but also Allen Lazard. And the reason for that is because the wide receiver group for the Green Bay Packers is having a mini COVID outbreak. So those guys are not going to be playing, which means the Packers are going to be left with guys like Randall Cobb, MVS, Amari Rodgers. And out of those guys, if you're going to go with the dart throw, I'd rather go with Randall Cobb, the wide receiver that has the most experience, the guy that Aaron Rodgers is the most comfortable with. I think he's going to get the most targets out of all these guys. You know, there's some boom or bust potential with all of them, but I think Cobb has the highest upside. But obviously, without Davante Adams, no wide receiver one for the Packers as far as fantasy is concerned. MVS potentially going to be returning this week, but with some time missed, I'm not a big fan playing him immediately. And then Amari Rodgers, just not enough experience, so I think a little bit too risky. And at the end of the day, I think guys like Aaron Jones and Robert Tonyan are going to be very, very involved as pass catchers as well. For the Arizona Cardinals, it's a little bit simpler. DeAndre Hopkins, we know the situation there. He is a pretty safe start, the top wide receiver for the Cardinals, a mid-level wide receiver one in fantasy. And then if you're going to take a chance on anyone else, I'd probably go with Christian Kirk. Yes, he is a bit boom or bust, but with the addition of Zach Ertz, I think he's going to take away, if anything, more targets from somebody like an AJ Green than a Christian Kirk. So for that reason, I prefer Kirk here, even with that boom or bust upside. You know, he's going to be as low as a low-end wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3, but obviously the ceiling is absolutely amazing, and especially in a good matchup here versus the Packers. And then, like I mentioned before, I'm sitting Rondale Moore and AJ Green. Just not enough balls to go around with all these guys. Then we go to the Panthers at the Falcons. For the Panthers, it's only DJ Moore. It's been only DJ Moore for a while. I think the question here is, what happens with the Panthers? Are they starting Sam Darnold after benching him versus the New York Giants with how bad he's played as of late? But honestly, PJ Walker isn't a better option, so I do think Sam Darnold will be back under center, and I'm going with DJ Moore here. Don't get me started on Robbie Anderson. The guy can't catch anything. The connection between him and Sam Darnold just isn't working. Terrace Marshall missed last week. Even if he plays here, I really don't want any other wide receiver other than DJ Moore, who I think, is very Sam Darnold dependent. If Sam Darnold has a good game, the guy can be a low-end wide receiver 1. If not, you're looking at a low-end wide receiver 2. I do think the matchup is potentially a good one, so I'm not necessarily out on more for the Falcons. Calvin Ridley, Russell Gage. Yes, Ridley has been disappointing, but the Falcons are starting to heat up a little bit. The Panthers are spiraling. I think this can be a good game for the pass catchers of Atlanta. I like Calvin Ridley as the number one guy, probably more so a low-end wide receiver 1, high-end wide receiver 2, especially with Kyle Pitts starting to take off. But don't sleep on Russell Gage either. He is starting to come into form after missing time with an injury, looking like Russell Gage of last season. And I do think in this matchup that could be, viable. I think you're looking at a low-end wide receiver 2, high-end wide receiver 3, which I would not mind some decent upside here. I think Matt Ryan has a big day, so I don't mind these two guys. And then afterwards, not really too many major names for the Falcons as far as wide receivers are concerned, so mainly Ridley and Gage as the starts. Then Titans at the Colts. Only really one name apiece here for the Titans. It's A.J. Brown. Two pretty good games back-to-back now. Being reestablished as the focal point as far as pass catchers on the team go. That's really nice to see. Finally starting to return some of that wide receiver 1 value that you drafted him as. Not afraid of this matchup here versus the Colts. And for Indy, Michael Pittman. Now, yes, didn't get all that many targets this last week versus the 49ers, but that was rain nonstop from start to finish. So you can't really blame the pass catchers on the Colts here. T.Y. Hilton missed that game. If he comes back here, I do expect, lessened targets for Pittman. But in my opinion, he's still the number 1 wide receiver on this team, so I wouldn't mind taking a chance on him, especially in PPR formats. But then Hilton, Zach Pascal, yes, it's a good matchup versus the Titans, but I think they're just a little bit too inconsistent, so I'd rather pass on them. To me, it's Pittman, it's the tight ends, and then it's Jonathan Taylor for this Colts offense. And then for the Titans, I'm just sitting Julio Jones. It's tough to see, but this offense, as far as passing the football, hasn't been what we were hoping for necessarily. That's why A.J. Brown was kind of disappointing to kick off the year. And Julio Jones looks like not 100%, so I'm going to be fading him here versus the Colts. Then Dolphins at the Bills. I'll start Jalen Waddle. The guy's getting absolutely peppered with targets. Obviously, a big reason for that is because Will Fuller not available. Devontae Parker's missed the last couple of games. Now notice Parker's name is listed here, but that is if he plays. It's still too early, to necessarily say that he will or that he won't. But if he does suit up, I think the Dolphins are going to have to pass the ball a lot here. And I think Waddle and Parker can both be low to mid-level wide receiver 2s. And if Parker doesn't play, well, that means good things for Waddle, good things for guys like Mike Gesicki. For the Bills, Stephon Diggs, Emmanuel Sanders. Emmanuel Sanders has been really one of the kind of hidden gems so far this season. Probably a guy that maybe was a waiver wire pickup. And he's been putting up close to double-digit numbers, on a week-to-week basis, especially if it's PPR scoring that you're in. So I don't mind him as a low-end wide receiver 2. The Stephon Diggs, obviously higher upside, a little bit more talented. We'll see if the targets come, if the touchdowns come, but those are the two starts. For the Bills then afterwards, sitting Cole Beasley again. I think his kind of performances are going to be a lot more inconsistent compared to Diggs and Sanders. So for that reason, I am passing on him there. Afterwards, Bengals at the Jets. I'll start Jamar Chase. I mean, the guy, even though he's a rookie, he has been absolutely sensational this last month. It's tough to sit him, and especially versus this matchup versus the New York Jets. Are you kidding me? Fire him up. I think he is low-end wide receiver 1, high-end wide receiver 2. And then T. Higgins, look, he is the number 2 wide receiver right now on this offense, but at least you have to be encouraged by the amount of targets he saw last week. In general, he's still getting usage. And again, this is a great matchup here versus the Jets. I think the top 2 names on the wide receiver core for the Bengals are going to get theirs, and so will the rushing attack for Cincinnati. For the Jets, obviously the big news, Zach Wilson will miss some time, so they trade for Joe Flacco. Flacco kind of familiar with the Jets. So I actually think that Corey Davis and Jamison Crowder are going to be decent starts. I don't really believe in the rushing attack here for the Jets versus this Bengals defense, which has been pretty good at stopping opposing running backs. I think it's going to have to require a lot of throwing the football, so Corey Davis and Jamison Crowder could be decent plays. Davis has the higher upside, as we've seen so far this season, but I don't mind Crowder in PPR formats. And then Tyler Boyd, I think he's just the odd man out for the Bengals. Too many mouths to feed. And when you factor in the rushing attack here, that's going to be prioritized, I would fade him. Moving on, Steelers at the Browns, Deontay Johnson, Chase Claypool. Deontay Johnson, the preferred option. He's going to get more targets, probably has higher upside in terms of yards, in terms of receptions, maybe even touchdowns. And I know Chase Claypool was disappointing the last time that the Steelers played, but he's still, not that far behind from Deontay Johnson. I think that was more so a fluke than anything else, so I would still start Claypool. For the Browns, is Baker Mayfield going to play? That's a big question, and it could potentially impact these wide receivers. Now, I currently have Odell Beckham as a start. Jarvis Landry is a bit banged up, didn't practice Monday. We'll see if it's cautionary or not, but I think the Browns here are going to have to throw the football yet again. Don't get me wrong, I don't like any one of these Browns wide receivers as even high-end wide receiver twos. I think they're probably both low-end wide receiver twos, maybe even in the wide receiver 3 category, but I think they're both going to get some decent targets where in PPR they could be all right. And then I'm sitting James Washington. He's the odd man out by far. He's not really going to take that Juju Smith-Schuster role, in my opinion, for the Steelers. For the Browns, Rashard Higgins, DPJ, again, to me, they're more so secondary with Nick Chubb back. A look at a focus on the rushing attack as well. Then Eagles at the Lions. For the Eagles, it continues to be the case. There's only one wide receiver worth starting. Yes, he is a little bit up and down, but it's Devonta Smith. If you're going to take a chance on any Eagles wide receiver, he is the one. For the Lions, seems like Khalif Raymond has kind of emerged as that number one wide receiver for the Lions. I mean, Amon-Ra St. Brown didn't get a single target this last week, and it's not like he didn't take offensive snaps. So kind of fading him and then go with Khalif Raymond, who's been the more consistent guy. I think he can potentially even outproduce Devonta Smith here. We will see on that front. But I think in PPR formats, the guy can be a low-end wide receiver too, like at worst. And then, like I said before, sitting Amon-Ra because the Lions they're looking at other options as far as pass catchers, running backs, tight ends. You get the point. St. Brown kind of the odd man out. And then Jalen Reagor, I shouldn't even list any other Philadelphia wide receivers other than Devonta Smith, but for the sake of, I guess some respect, we're listing his name, but he is still a sit big time. Then Rams at the Texans. I only like the Rams wide receivers here. Spoiler, Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods. Kupp is, the guy's playing like a not top 5, not top 3, like the best wide receiver in fantasy football, period. You continue to start him, especially versus the Texans. Even with Robert Woods disappointing, I am continue to start him. I think he's going to have a good matchup here versus the Texans. Yes, the Rams could focus on the rushing attack just because the Texans are so bad, but I think Robert Woods is still the number 2 guy on this offense, and that is worth something. For the Texans, Brendan Cooks is the name. Now, worth mentioning, somebody like a Tyrod Taylor at quarterback might be getting closer to a return, but versus this Rams defense, I'm not all that excited about any of the wide receivers. Brendan Cooks is really the only name worth mentioning, but I would be fading him here. He hasn't really been all that great since Tyrod Taylor went out. And again, even if Taylor comes back, I really don't love the matchup here. For the Rams, sitting Van Jefferson and Deshaun Jackson, I just don't think there's going to be enough volume to go around, especially with what I presume to be a run-heavy game plan versus the Texans. Afterwards, 49ers at the Bears. Again, really only one name I want to start here. That is Deebo Samuel. He has been the guy for the 49ers. Forget about any other wide receivers. It's Deebo Samuel. It's Deebo Samuel. It's Deebo Samuel. Brendan Ayuk, to the extent where not only is a sit, but he's a guy that, some people are probably dropping right now. That's how non-existent he has been. For the Bears, man, it's really, really bad. Allen Robinson probably also kind of in that category of a Brendan Ayuk, one of the most disappointing wide receivers this season. And he just hasn't been able to get it done. Yes, this is probably a better matchup for the Bears compared to versus the Tampa Bay Bucks last week, where they were absolutely god-awful. And, I wouldn't be shocked if Robinson and Mooney have bounce-back performances, but I've seen nothing from Allen Robinson so far. I think that offensive line for the Bears is awful. Justin Fields is getting hit repeatedly, and I just don't trust him or the offense, so I'm sitting Robinson and Darnell Mooney. Then Patriots at the Chargers. For the Patriots, it continues to only be Jacoby Myers. He's getting the targets in PPR that is valuable. And, at one point or another, he's going to get a touchdown, I hope. But even without it, he's still been putting up decent numbers. So you start him. He's in the low-end wide receiver 2 category. If he gets a touchdown, great. He can be a really nice surprise for the Chargers. Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, you start him every single week. Mike Williams, playing like the better wide receiver. Keenan Allen, though, pretty safe bet in PPR as well. And then I'm sitting Nelson Aguilar and Kendrick Bourne. To me, they are too inconsistent, unlike Jacoby Myers. Afterwards, Jags at the Seahawks. I'll start Marvin Jones and Laviska Shenault. Without Russell Wilson, this Seahawks team, kind of is experiencing that trickle-down effect where they're getting impacted offensively and defensively. The offense can't stay on the field. Yes, it's going to be versus the Jacksonville Jaguars, but the Seahawks defense, it's really not that imposing. It's giving up so many yards this season. So I think Jones and Laviska can have decent outings. For Seattle, DK Metcalf, I've said it before, but Tyler Lockett without Russell Wilson is somebody that I am absolutely not interested in starting. You knew with Russell Wilson, Lockett would have like boom or bust weeks where certain weeks he puts up 40 plus points and then other weeks under 10 points. Well, without Russell Wilson, it's like either 10 points or, 2 or 3 points. I'm just sitting him here. I know the matchup is very good versus the Jaguars, but I think it's DK Metcalf. He's that much bigger, more physical wide receiver that Geno Smith would naturally go to because he's not an excellent, thrower of the football. And then probably also going to be a focus on the rushing attack versus this Jaguars defense as well. I think Metcalf is probably a high-end wide receiver too. Then Bucks at the Saints. I'm starting the trio of the Tampa Bay wide receivers. Antonio Brown didn't play last week, which meant huge ceilings for Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. They both had some really nice games, especially Mike Evans. If Antonio Brown plays, all these guys, the ceilings are lessened, kind of in the mid to low end wide receiver 2 category with some still, decent boom upside, though. For the Saints, I'm actually going to take a chance on Marquez Callaway. Yes, I know it was pretty much just the Alvin Kamara show for the Saints this last week as far as pass catchers were concerned, but I anticipate that the Bucs are going to put up points here versus the Saints, and Jameis Winston is going to be airing out the football. He's not one afraid to do that, and that's the weakness for the Bucs. That secondary. Callaway is by far and away without Michael Thomas, the top option that they have. I think he can actually be a sneaky play with some nice boom upside on the week. And then I'm sitting Traquan Smith. Really, any other New Orleans wide receiver, I don't think they're really worth all that much. Potentially, depending on matchups, Callaway is also a risky start, but I think this week it could potentially be all right. But Traquan Smith is somebody that I am fading. Then Washington at the Broncos. Really only one name apiece here, Terry McLaurin for Washington. That continues to be the case. I continue to say it. Heineke cannot support more than one fantasy-relevant wide receiver. Yes, McLaurin is a bit kind of boom or bust. It seems like he either puts up 20-plus points or under 10 points, and this is a good Broncos defense, so I would say temper the expectations. But with McLaurin, he's so good, and he's the primary guy that you almost kind of have to start him. I don't want to say kind of like a Tyler Lockett, but there are some similarities there. I would just say he's probably more so a wide receiver 2 on the week. For the Broncos, only Courtland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy potentially going to be back here. I think with Teddy Bridgewater there, with Noah Fant, with Tim Patrick, I think there's just way too many guys, and I don't think Bridgewater is the type of quarterback that can sustain all of that production. So for that reason, I would only go with Courtland Sutton, who I think is a mid-level wide receiver 2 here with Jerry Jeudy back. Then Cowboys at the Vikings. I will start Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb. I think this could be one of the higher scoring affairs of the week. Potentially Michael Gallup should be returning here, and if that is the case, I do think, again, it probably lowers the ceilings for Cooper and Lamb a little bit. Even though I do have Michael Gallup as a sit, mainly because that's kind of my philosophy. That first week back, I usually kind of sit those wide receivers, and that's the way I view it for Gallup here. For the Vikings, Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, I think they're going to have to throw a bunch to keep pace, so I really like Jefferson and Thielen here. I think, worst case, they're both high-end wide receiver twos. And then finally, Giants at the Chiefs. This one's tough for the Giants. It all depends on wide receiver health. Right now I've got Shepard and Kadarius Toney listed as starts. It's still early in the week, and by the time, Thursday, Friday hits, both these guys could have been ruled out. That was kind of the case this last week, but if they play, these would be my two preferred options here. The Chiefs have not been good so far this season, especially defensively, and Shepard and Toney would be my preferred starts. I think Shepard could be a high-end wide receiver 2, Toney low to mid-level wide receiver 2. But let's go over the scenarios. If Shepard and Toney don't play, then Darius Slayton is a start. He should get a lot of volume, as was the case last week versus the Panthers. I don't anticipate Kenny Golladay will play. He's missed the last couple of weeks. He's got a dislocated knee. So I don't necessarily think it's going to be a return this week. We'll see, though. If he does, that would be a pleasant surprise. You can consider him. Just a lot of factors here. Basically, keep an eye out on the injury report for the Giants. For the Chiefs, Tyreek Hill, he continues to be the main guy to start. Yes, the Chiefs had one of their worst games that I've seen them have, since the Patrick Mahomes era began this last week versus the Titans. But I'm not going to be scared off. Tyreek Hill is still a wide receiver 1. You continue to start him. I think the Chiefs will bounce back offensively here, but Hardman, Demarcus Robinson for Kansas City just a little bit too inconsistent, so I am sitting them in this matchup. But with that, we wrap up our Week 8 fantasy football wide receiver starts and sits for every single game. And as always, let us hear in the comment section, did you agree, disagree, along with any other questions you guys might have. We will do our best to answer them. If you enjoyed, hit that like button, subscribe, and make sure to give us a follow on Twitter at AllDayPigskin to continue interacting with us there. But in the meantime, we'll see you guys in future videos.